The sky was red, not the red of a sunset, but the red of blood. Smoke covered the mountains. Fire burned the trees. The land was dying. Far below, inside a dark cave, a group of alien beings sat in silence. They were the Valari, a peaceful species who once sang songs to the stars. Now they had no songs left, only fear. Children cried softly. Old ones whispered prayers, and the fighters, what was left of them, watched the sky with tired eyes. It had been 92 days since the Drexar Empire came. They came with ships that blocked the sun. They came with machines that turned forests into ash. They came for one reason, to destroy. The Valeri tried to fight. They used old weapons and brave hearts. But it was not enough. The Drexar were too strong, too fast, too cruel. Now the Valeri were hunted like animals. In the cave, an elder named Laura stood near the entrance. Her skin was pale and cracked. Her eyes were deep like old rivers. She looked up at the sky. "There is no hope," whispered one of the young warriors. "No one is coming." Laura did not answer. She just looked at the sky. The silence above was louder than the scream. Suddenly, a sound, distant and low, cut through the air. It was not thunder. There were no clouds. The sound grew louder. A strange light appeared high above the mountains. The young warrior stood up. "What is that?" The sky flashed once, then again. Laura's eyes widened. Her voice trembled. "It has begun." The others rushed outside. From the high ground they saw it. Something falling from the sky. No, not something. Many things. Burning trails of fire streaked across the heavens. "They are bombs," someone cried. "No," Laura whispered. "They are not Drexar." One of the objects crashed far in the distance, lighting the valley with a white-blue glow. The ground shook beneath their feet. Then a sound crackled in the air. Faint, broken like a whisper through metal. A voice. Human voice. "This is Surgeon Carter, survivors of the crash. Not Drexar. Repeat, not Drexar. Need assistance." The Valeri stared at each other. None of them understood the words, but they understood the tone. It was not a threat. It was a cry for help. Another Valeri, young and brave, spoke. "The sky has answered us." Laura nodded slowly. "Long ago, our ancestors spoke of fire people. Beings from far stars. Some said it was a myth. A story for children. But now, maybe the story is real." Night fell fast. The fires in the distance still burned. The Valeri watched from the cliffs. Something moved in the smoke. Tall, armored shapes. Not Drexar. Different. One of them limped. Another carried a broken device. They walked like soldiers. Eyes sharp. Weapons strange. They were humans. The youngest Valeri child whispered, "Are they gods?" Laura shook her head. "No, they bleed. They fall. But they do not run." Behind the humans, more lights fell from the sky. Some exploded. Some landed. It was chaos, but a different kind of chaos. Not destruction. Change. Meanwhile, in a hidden Drexar command post, a commander watched the sky through black glass. His eyes narrowed. His assistant asked, "Sir, what are those objects?" The commander growled, "They are trouble." Back at the cave, Laura turned to her people. "Listen, we may not understand who they are, but the sky sent them for a reason. We must find them before the Drexar do." The young warrior nodded. "I will go." "No," said Laura. "We will all go. If this is hope, it belongs to all of us." And so, for the first time in weeks, the Valeri walked into the open, not as prey, but as people who dared to believe once more. Far in the distance, a human soldier turned his head. His suit was damaged. His face was bleeding. But he smiled as he looked at the sky. "We made it," he said. "Let's hope we're not too late." The fire still burned in the valley. Smoke curled into the night sky like fingers of a dead god. The Valeri stood on the ridge, looking down at the strange beings who had fallen from the stars. They had never seen humans before. Tall, armored, wounded, but standing strong. The Valari whispered among themselves. Who are they? Are they like the Drexar? Can they be trusted? The young warrior Kale stepped forward. He held a wooden spear shaking in his hands. His eyes locked onto the nearest human. His armor cracked, a red line running down his forehead. The human saw him too. Their eyes met. The human raised one hand slowly, not to strike, but in peace. Kale hesitated. Then he did the same. Laura, the elder, stepped beside Kale. She spoke softly. They carry fire, but I feel no hate from them. More humans appeared, 7 total. 2 injured, 1 unconscious. They were setting up lights and machines. Their words were strange, fast, and sharp. The Valari could not understand them. But they understood the feeling. These were warriors, but not enemies. The next day, the Valari helped carry the injured human to shelter. One human, a woman with short hair and a serious face, nodded in thanks. Her name was Sergeant Miller. She tried to speak with Laura, pointing to the sky, to the Drexar, then to herself. Laura listened. She did not understand the words, but her heart understood the message. They had not come to conquer. They had come to fight. Far away in the mountains, a Drexar scout watched from the shadows. He saw humans walking with Valari. He saw machines being powered up. He clicked a button on his wrist. A silent signal was sent. Back at the human crash site, Kale watched as one of the humans, Carter, worked on a strange metal suit. It was broken. The lights blinked weakly. Wires sparked. But Carter worked fast, hands dirty, eyes focused. What is it? Kale asked softly. Carter looked up. He didn't understand the words, but he smiled. He pointed to the suit, then to the sky, then to his chest. Then he said one word, fight. Kale nodded slowly. He understood now. These people had fallen from the sky to fight the Drexar. Suddenly, a loud blast echoed from the trees. The camp shook. Fire exploded near the human supplies. The Drexar had found them. Black armored figures rushed from the forest, weapons ready, eyes glowing red. The Valari screamed, some ran, but Kale stood his ground. Carter shouted to his team. Guns fired. Blue light filled the air. It was chaos. One of the Drexar charged at Kale. The young Valari raised his spear, but the Drexar knocked him down. Before the Drexar could strike again, a sound like thunder filled the air. Boom! Sergeant Miller stood above Kale, holding a human weapon. The Drexar lay dead at her feet. She pulled Kale up. He stared at her, stunned. You're okay, she said, even though he couldn't understand. You're okay. The battle ended quickly. The Drexar retreated. But one human was down, hit in the side. His breathing was slow. Laura rushed to him. Her hands glowed faintly with healing light. The humans watched, surprised. Kale looked at Carter. We have no guns, no ships, no armor, but we can still help. Carter smiled. He pointed to Kale, then to himself. Together. That night, the Valari lit a fire and gave the humans food. Strange fruits, cooked roots. The humans shared their water and bandages. They sat together in silence, but not in fear. Kale stood, holding a small stone. In our stories, he said slowly, pointing to the humans, we speak of fire people, who fall from the sky when we need them most. I thought they were legends, but now I believe. The Valari began to call the humans the fire people. They had come from the stars with weapons, with courage, and with something more, hope. The night was quiet, too quiet. The Valari sat around their fire, watching the stars, but the humans weren't sleeping. They were busy, repairing their gear, checking their weapons. They were always moving, always working. They didn't trust the night. Sergeant Miller was the first to speak the truth. She had no need for lies. "We're not here for you," she told Laura bluntly, her eyes hard. "We're here for them." She pointed north toward the Drexar stronghold hidden in the mountains. Laura nodded slowly, her voice soft. "I understand. The Drexar are your enemy." Miller's eyes darkened. She didn't answer right away. Her hand shook as she cleaned her weapon, a rare moment of vulnerability. "Not just ours," she said finally, her voice lower. "They killed everything. My world, my people, all of them." Cale, standing nearby, overheard. He didn't understand everything, but he could feel the weight in Miller's words. She was carrying something heavier than any weapon. Carter walked over to Miller and put a hand on her shoulder, his eyes tired but steady. "We're not just hunting them," he added. "We're hunting them down for what they did to us." Elsewhere, deep in the Drexar command center, the Drexar commander stared at his screen. His red eyes glowed like fire. He had received reports. Humans had survived the crash. They had found allies among the Velari. The commander clicked a button, speaking to his assistant. "Prepare the fleet. The fire people will not escape." His voice was cold like ice. "We will finish what we started." Back at the camp, the Velari began to trust the humans more, but there was a deep question in their minds. Why had these fire people fallen from the sky? What did they want? Laura gathered the elders around the fire. Cale, standing at the edge, listened. He could hear the fear in their voices. "We should leave," one of the elders said. "We cannot trust them. They are warriors. Their fight is not ours." But Laura raised a hand. "No," she said firmly. "I feel something different. These fire people, they are not like the Drexar." The next morning, Cale was tasked with a mission. He had to gather more food from the distant hills. As he walked through the dense forest, he thought about the humans. There was something about them, something not just in their words, but in their actions. They didn't fight because they enjoyed it. They fought because they had to. As he walked, he noticed something strange. There were tracks, deep, heavy tracks, not from any animal he had seen. These tracks were large, and they were fresh. Cale followed them for hours. By the time the sun was low in the sky, Cale had discovered something disturbing. A Drexar scout, lying face down in the dirt, his body torn apart. But there was something else, something that made Cale's heart race. The Drexar had been killed by humans. The weapons used were unmistakable. These weren't just warriors. They were assassins. Cale knelt beside the body, his hands trembling. He had known the humans were fighting the Drexar. But this was different. Back at the Velari camp, Carter and Miller stood around a fire, speaking in low voices. "They know, don't they?" Carter asked, glancing at the Velari who were watching from a distance. Miller nodded slowly. "They'll find out soon enough." She paused. "We need to move faster. The Drexar are closing in." Just as Miller finished speaking, the shout rang out from the edge of the camp. Cale ran toward them, his breath quick. "They're here. The Drexar. They know where we are." Miller cursed. She looked around. "We have to fight. We can't hide anymore." But Laura stepped forward. She wasn't afraid, but her face was full of sorrow. "The Drexar know nothing about us," she said, her voice steady. "They think we are weak, but we have one thing they do not." Miller raised an eyebrow. "What's that?" Laura smiled, though it wasn't a happy smile. "We have you." That night, as the humans and Velari prepared for battle, Cale stood alone at the edge of the camp, looking at the stars. He had always been taught that the sky was a place of peace, but now it felt like a place of judgment. He thought about the Drexar, about their cruelty, their endless hunger for war. And he thought about the humans, what they had lost, what they were willing to fight for. In that moment, Cale knew the truth. They weren't just fighting for survival. They were fighting for revenge. The ground trembled beneath their feet as the Velari and humans prepared for the Drexar's attack. The air was thick with smoke and fear. The night sky was painted red with the fires that still burned in the distance. Miller stood next to Laura, her hands on her hips. "We don't have much time." "The Drexar are too close," she said, scanning the horizon. "We need to make a stand before they surround us." Laura nodded, but her face was troubled. She could feel the weight of the moment. The Valari had never fought a war like this. They were not soldiers. They were people of peace. But they had no choice now. The Drexar would kill them all if they didn't fight. Kale walked over, his spear in hand, his expression determined. "We can hold them off. We've been training." Miller didn't seem so sure. She glanced at the few makeshift weapons the Valari had crafted in the battered human equipment. It wasn't enough. They needed a miracle. Then the ground shook again. This time it wasn't from the distance. The Drexar had arrived. From the trees, dark figures emerged, moving in quick, silent formations. They had the element of surprise. They were here. In the shadows, a Valari warrior named Jarek watched the humans prepare for battle. His face was hidden in the dark, but his eyes gleamed with something else, doubt. Jarek had been watching Carter, Miller, and the others. Something about them felt wrong. Too many secrets, too much tension. And then he saw something that made his heart race. A small hidden device on Carter's belt. A tracking beacon. Jarek's mind raced. It couldn't be. But the truth was undeniable. Carter had betrayed them. Meanwhile, the Drexar charged. The air was filled with screams and gunfire. The humans fired back, but the Drexar were relentless. The Valari fought with their crude weapons, but it was clear they were outmatched. As the battle raged, Jarek made his decision. He ran through the smoke and chaos, heading for the human camp. His heart pounded. He had to confront Carter. He had to stop whatever plan the humans had. Carter and Miller were in the center of the fight, leading the charge. But as they fought, Miller's eyes locked onto Jarek, who was moving toward them through the smoke. She saw the anger in his eyes. Before she could react, Carter grabbed her arm. "Something's wrong," he said, his voice tense. "Stay close." But it was too late. Jarek reached them. "Traitors," he shouted, pointing at Carter. "You've been lying to us. You're working with the Drexar." Carter's face went pale. He tried to speak, but the words caught in his throat. Miller stepped forward, raising her weapon. "Jarek, this isn't the time for this," she shouted, but her voice was shaky. Jarek didn't back down. He pulled out a small communicator from his pocket and activated it. A message flashed on the screen. "Mission update. Tracking beacon activated. Coordinates received. Ready for extraction." The truth was clear now. Carter wasn't just a soldier. He was a spy. The revelation hit like a hammer. In that instant, everything changed. Miller turned to Carter. "You were never here to help us. You were here to lead them to us." Carter took a step back, his eyes full of regret. I had no choice. They gave me no choice." But it was too late for excuses. The Drexar were closing in. Suddenly there was an explosion. The earth shook beneath their feet. Jarek fell to the ground, his body thrown back by the blast. Miller spun around. The Drexar had planted explosives. The Valari screamed in terror as the camp began to burn. "Fall back," Miller shouted, but the chaos was too much. The Drexar were everywhere now, their weapons tearing through the defenses. Laura, her face grim, pulled Kale toward the edge of the camp. "We have to get out. Now." But Kale hesitated, looking back at Carter, who was standing frozen, guilt written across his face. "We can't fight them," Kale said, his voice breaking. "Not like this. We need a plan." Carter finally moved, grabbing a weapon and firing at a group of Drexar soldiers. But it was clear, it was too late. They had no chance of winning this fight. In the distance, a ship appeared, descending rapidly from the sky. It was not human. It was Drexar reinforcements. Miller cursed under her breath. "We're out of time." The human soldiers, now trapped, made their final stand. Carter and Miller fought side by side, trying to hold back the Drexar, but they were overwhelmed. There was no escape. And then, just when it seemed like all hope was lost, Laura shouted, "Move!" In a flash, the Valari had activated a series of explosives hidden around the camp, bombs they had planted in secret, weapons they had never used before. The ground shook again. A massive explosion rocked the area, sending Drexar soldiers flying. The camp was in ruins, but the Drexar were not finished. They were angry. Smoke covered the valley like a dark blanket. Ash fell from the sky like dead snow. The Valari camp was gone, burned, crushed, buried under rubble. The Drexar had vanished into the shadows, but they had left pain behind. Kale crawled out from under a broken piece of stone. His face was cut, his hands bleeding, but he was alive. Around him, others were not so lucky. He looked around, coughing, calling softly. "Laura? Miller? Anyone?" Only silence answered. Then a faint voice. "I'm here." It was Miller. She was pinned under part of a broken ship panel. Kale rushed over, using all his strength to pull it off her. She groaned in pain but managed to sit up. "Damn Drexar," she muttered, blood on her lips. "They knew exactly where to hit us." Kale nodded. "Because of Carter." Miller's jaw tightened. She looked away. "Yeah," she said softly, "because of him." Elsewhere, deep in the forest, Laura was helping injured Valari. Her robes were torn, her hands shaking, but her voice stayed calm. "We must gather. We must not fall apart." One of the young Valari cried out, "The humans brought death." But Laura shook her head. "No, one human betrayed us, but others, they stood and fought with us. They bled for us." She looked up at the mountains where the Drexar had returned to their stronghold. "We're not finished yet." Night fell fast and cold. Miller and Kale made a small fire in the woods, hidden under a stone ledge. They had found a few survivors, 2 humans and 5 Valari. One of the humans, a young tech named Evans, sat shaking. "We're done. No backup. No supplies. That was it. We were the mission." Miller stared into the flames. "Then we make a new mission." Evans laughed bitterly. "With what? Sticks and old stories?" Kale stood, his voice firm. "With purpose." He pointed to the sky. "The Fire People came for revenge. But now, we fight not just for your world, but for ours." Miller looked at Kale, surprised. He was not the same boy she had met. He had changed. He had become a leader. Far above them, inside a cold metal room, Carter was alive, but barely. The Drexar had taken him. He was chained, weak, wounded, but breathing. The Drexar commander stood in front of him, arms crossed. "You failed," the commander hissed. "You were supposed to deliver them. You let them scatter." Carter coughed. "You got what you wanted. You destroyed the camp." The Drexar leaned closer, eyes glowing. "No, we wanted them all. We wanted Hope to die." He turned away. "You will be useful in the final assault." Back in the forest, Kale and Miller began to plan. They marked a map in the dirt, using stones and sticks. "The Drexar stronghold is here," Kale pointed. "We attack from the side. There's an old tunnel system. My people used it long ago." Evans raised an eyebrow. "Attack? With what? Hope and courage?" Miller smirked. "Better than fear and nothing." Over the next 2 days, the survivors trained. The Valari practiced with salvaged weapons, learned human tactics. The humans adapted to forest terrain, moved quieter, trusted more. Kale led the training with fierce focus. He no longer doubted himself. He had seen death. Now he chose life. Laura returned with news. "There are more Valari in the hills. They are ready to fight." She paused, looking at Miller. "They believe in the Fire People now." Miller didn't smile, but her eyes softened. "Then let's give them something to believe in." On the 3rd night, they stood at the entrance of the mountain tunnels, silent, ready. Kale wore Drexar armor stolen from the battlefield. His face was painted with ash. Miller stood beside him, her arm wrapped in cloth, her rifle loaded with the last power cell. "We go quiet," she said. "We hit fast. Get in. Get out." Cale nodded. "We bring down the fortress." "And Carter?" Evans asked quietly. Cale didn't answer right away. "If he's alive, we bring him back. But if he's helping them again," Miller finished for him. "Then we end it." The tunnel was cold and narrow. Every step echoed like a warning. Cale led the way, his spear in one hand, a torch in the other. Behind him, Miller, Evans, and the remaining fighters followed in silence. The mountain felt alive, breathing, watching. They had one goal: destroy the Drexar Command Corps. This was their last chance. Deep inside the Drexar stronghold, Carter sat in his cell. Bruised, broken, but alive. He had made mistakes, deadly ones, but regret burned hotter than pain. A quiet beep caught his attention. Under the bench, hidden in the shadows, was the old transmitter the Drexar forgot to remove. It still blinked. Weak signal, but still working. He reached for it. Cale's group emerged into a large chamber. It was the heart of the Drexar base, full of machines, glowing lights, and the hum of war engines. "This is it," whispered Miller. Just then the alarm blared. Red lights, sirens, footsteps. "They know we're here." From every corner, Drexar soldiers appeared. Black armor, red eyes, no fear. Cale raised his spear. "Fight." The chamber exploded in chaos. Bullets flew, blades clashed. The Volari moved like shadows, using speed and silence. The humans fought with fire and precision. Every second mattered. Miller sprinted toward the power core. She planted the explosives while Evans covered her. 30 seconds, she shouted. In the prison wing, Carter activated the beacon. A tiny screen flashed. "Detonator armed. Confirm override." He hesitated. He could stop the explosion. He could save himself. But then he saw the faces of the Volari, the ones who trusted him, the ones who died. He pressed confirm, but not to stop it. He set a second charge, one buried beneath the main power source. "If we're going to end it," he muttered, "let's end it for good." Back in the chamber, Cale fought hand-to-hand with a Drexar commander. The alien swung a heavy blade, slicing the air just inches from Cale's face. Cale dodged, ducked, and finally drove his spear into the Drexar's chest. "No more running," he growled. Across the room, Miller and Evans finished wiring the last explosive. "Time's up," Miller shouted. "Go, now," Cale yelled. The team sprinted toward the exit tunnels as the countdown began. But Cale paused, looking back at the burning machines, the flashing lights. And then he saw him. Carter, limping toward them, his body weak but eyes full of fire. "You're still alive," Miller shouted. "Not for long," Carter said, tossing her a small device. "That's the master trigger. Get them out. I'll stay." Miller froze. "You don't have to." "Yes, I do," Carter said, breathing hard. "Let me do one thing right." The team escaped through the tunnels as the base started to shake. The mountain above began to crack. Boom. The first blast hit, then the second. The Drexar core erupted in fire, taking the stronghold with it. A tower of smoke and flame burst into the sky. The mountain collapsed. And with it, the Drexar army was no more. Days later, the forest was quiet again. Birds returned. Rivers ran clear. The war was over. Laura stood at the edge of a cliff, watching the wind carry away the last of the smoke. Miller stood beside her, arm in a sling, face calm for the first time. "Carter didn't make it," Laura said softly. Miller nodded. "He gave us a second chance." Cale walked up, a new symbol carved into his armor, the mark of both his people and the humans. "We will remember him, and all who fell." He looked to the sky. "Because of them, we are free." Back at the ruined battlefield, small green plants began to grow through the ash. New life, new hope. The Valari would rebuild, and the humans would never be forgotten.